Aminov's experience. I've been counting down the time to meet her personally, to tell over her unbelievable story. We are honored to have Mrs. Charlene Aminov. Thank you.
There are seats over here.
First of all, I know it's late, so if any of you have to go, I promise you won't offend me. Just get up and walk out, it's fine.
We're locking the doors.
So, first of all, this is a beautiful turnout, and my sister Jasmine and I were just talking. Jasmine happens to have a bunch of girls in Bnos Beis Yaakov, so she's familiar with this area. I'm not, but she was just saying this is such a beautiful thing to maybe consider bringing to Great Neck, which is where we're from. So, Mir Hashem, this might have just expanded the Peninim. Bli Neder, we'll see. First of all, I want to dedicate tonight's speech to, first and foremost, to my mother, Dina Bas Tamar, who needs a refuah, but also to two young boys in my community who also need a Yeshua. Their names are Rafael Ben Michal and Yaakov Yitzchak Ben Michal. It should be a refuah shalima for them. So I'm going to start with a little introduction about myself. My name is Charlene. I'm 31. I come from Great Neck, part of the Mashadi Persian community in Great Neck. And my husband and I, Baruch Hashem, we're married 11 years. We have 5 kids under the age of 8, so it's a fun Baruch Hashem circus we got going on. And my husband is the CEO of a hedge fund. Well, he's retired now. He was the CEO of a hedge fund. He was in the stock market for 20 years. But he was also a Hatzalah volunteer for 20 years. The Chafetz Chaim says that every nace has a price tag. And you don't want the price tag to be too hefty because it takes up too much zechusim. So in order to bring down the price tag, you have to do Persumei Nisa. You have to mefarsem your nace. So I'm here tonight to be mefarsem my nace. And I'm hoping that by me doing my hishtabus, of doing my Persumei Nisa, we can get back some zechusim, because my nace was a pretty hefty price tag attached to it. I'm here to share my story about my daughter Gali. Gali is short for Abigail. When she was born, my older sons couldn't pronounce Abigail, so they nicknamed her Gali, and the name kind of stuck because she looks like a Gali. She's really cute. And the story actually takes place 2.5 years ago, on Tu B'Av. It was July 26th, 2010. We have a home in Miami. We have a summer home in Miami Beach, in the Green Diamond. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Miami Beach. It's 47th and Collins. And we usually move down with my husband and my kids. We moved down to Florida end of June, and we moved back end of August. Being away from the grandparents for such a long time takes its toll on them. So we usually have my in-laws and my parents come down, alternating every other weekend, just so they could spend time with the kids. July 26th was a Monday. It was Tu B'Av. And you may or may not know that Tu B'Av is one of the days of the Jewish calendar where you're able to see and receive the most nisim. And Hodul Hashem, I was zochet to be one of the grateful recipients of a giant nace. My husband is being in the stock market. He's attached to his computer most of the time, but mostly between 3 p.m. and 4 p.m. That's the final hour of the trading day. So he decided on that day that we're going to go with the kids on the wave runners. We have, in Miami Beach, we have a boat, and we decided after we go on our boat, we're going to go wave running. My boys love that, and it's definitely a way to keep them busy. And I had just given birth to my 3-week-old. Her name is Aliza. So my mother and father had flown down with my brother to hang out with us. So I told my mom to stay with the baby Aliza because she was so little and it was too hot. And my daughter Gali fell asleep by the pool. So my housekeeper said she's going to stay with her by the pool. She fell asleep, she hung out next to Gali. They were safe in the shade by the pool. My mom was strolling around baby Aliza, and my husband and I, along with my older 2 boys, decided to go wave running with my father and my brother. My husband made reservations for 2 p.m. And we figured he'd be back for sure by 3 o'clock. It's going to take about half hour, 45 minutes to wave run, and then we're going to be back with enough time for him to get back upstairs to his computer. Obviously, Hashem had different plans. When we got to the wave runner stand, we realized that one of the jet skis were broken. So what happened is we had to wait until all the other jet skis were brought back, and then alternate, taking turns. And then when we finally did decide we're done wave running, my brother, who was 18 at the time, said, you know what, I changed my mind, I want to go again. And my husband's like, well, I'm sorry, I gotta go. It's almost time for the last hour of the day, I have to go. And he's like, please, 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 can we just go, like, just one more time? So my husband says, okay, fine, you can go ahead, no problem. But what happens? He's under 21, and for insurance purposes, if you're not 21, you're not allowed to go on the wave runner alone. So who gets stuck sitting behind him? My poor husband. So Jonathan, my husband, was not thrilled, but he was being a mensch about it, going behind my 18-year-old brother. What happened? They got onto the wave runner, and once they were all the way out, the jet ski broke down. And then they started screaming for help, and they had to wait for a long time until help arrived. By the time help arrived and they got back to shore, it was already 3:30. My husband, a bit of a strong character, decided, you know what, if you can't beat him, join him. He said, there's no point in going back upstairs when there's only half hour left. I might as well just hang out with you guys by the pool. So we decided we're going to head towards the pool and have lunch. As we approached the pool, my husband and I, along with my sons and my father and my brother, we hear someone screaming, screeching, somebody call 911, somebody call 911. So my husband, being in Hatzalah for 20 years, he's a medic, turns to the man and says, well, what's the matter? I can help you. And we all approach the pool, and we see a man holding the dead body of a little girl in the pool. And my heart starts to race because I think she looks so familiar. And all of a sudden, I look to where Gali was supposed to be sleeping, and I see she's not there. But my housekeeper is asleep right next to her. And if I can tell you what Gehenna feels like, I promise you I can describe it in vivid detail. The man turns around, and I see he's holding the dead body of my little girl Gali, my 2-year-old precious girl, my everything. I watched Gehenna unfold. And all I was thinking is, what am I going to do? How am I going to wake up tomorrow and live? My husband immediately grabbed Gali and started performing CPR on her. And he's a very, very calm and he's always in control. But he was screaming, Gali, come back to daddy! Gali, come back to daddy! And all I could do was stand there, looking at my daughter. Her eyes were open, her face was blue, her nails, I keep remembering, her nails were purple. And in that moment, I said, you know what? There's one thing that I've always been very good at. I wasn't always from, but one thing I always had a major kesher with was Tehillim. And I remember thinking, in Perek Kuf Yutet, the first pasuk of the portion of Kuf is Karati b'chol lev aneni Adonai chukecha etzora, which means, and I cried out with all my heart, answer me Hashem, I will keep your ways. And I figured, I gotta give something. I gotta give a gigantic korban to Hashem if I want to make any changes in what's going on with this reality right now. I gotta do something big. So I decided that the only thing I could think of was my beautiful hair. Although I was Shomer Torah and Mitzvot, I was not yet covering my hair 100%. I was wearing my hair down with a bandana, or a hat, or a beret, but my hair wasn't fully covered. And the reason it wasn't fully covered is because I'm Persian, like I said, and I have beautiful blonde hair, which doesn't always work. Persians are usually dark hair, dark skin, dark eyes, but for me, my hair was my identity. And I never thought that being the wife of a CEO of a hedge fund, I'm going to be able to walk into a gala where we take out all these big investors, and I'm wearing a Carolina Herrera dress and be decked in Harry Winston jewelry, but I'm wearing a sheitel on my head, or a mitpachat on my head. It didn't make sense. So I kept pushing it off, and I kept pushing it off, and I kept saying one day. Well, that day, July 26, 2010, was the day Hashem had planned for me. Because what I chose to do is, while watching my husband perform CPR on my little daughter, I grabbed a blue pashmina shawl, which was the only thing I could find, and I started screaming and sobbing, "Shehechianu v'kimanu v'higyanu lazman hazeh," and I began to wrap my hair. And I wrapped my hair, and I have a lot of long, thick hair, and it took me a while to wrap it, and I was frantic, and I was screaming and sobbing and rapping and observing and rapping, and I cannot tell you what was going through my heart and through my mind. All I kept thinking was, what is anything in my life, my gosh, the money, the jewelry, the gashmis, ever going to matter ever again to me if I wake up tomorrow and I don't have Gali? And I promise you, at that moment, all my priorities in my life shifted. I grabbed this blue pashmina shawl, and by the time I finished wrapping, my husband looks over at me, and he recognizes what I'm doing. He recognizes that this is a neder, it's my Kabbalah, le'olam va'ed. It's a one-way street, there's no going back. Regardless of my outcome, I was going to be covering my hair for the rest of my life. And he looks at me, and even though he's a tremendous balzdaka, tremendous bal chesed, and a huge tzaddik, he's not a big davener. He's not like a spiritual man. He's tachlis. Get the job done. But he looks at me, and he stops performing CPR, and he starts mamish storming Shamayim. And he's going like this, and he's shaking and begging Hashem. I could see that he's having this intense conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All because he's watching me wrap my hair and struggle and wrap and tuck and wrap. By the time I finished my shechianu and I tucked that last strand of hair into my shawl, and my husband finished his little tefillah with Hashem, he started screaming, I got her pulse! I got her pulse! I got her pulse! Till this day, that is my favorite sentence that I've ever heard him say. More than I love you, more than will you marry me, I got her pulse is the best thing he has ever said. The stretcher was waiting, and we loaded her up, and we headed off for the hospital. Jonathan got there with the ambulance, and I drove behind with police escort. I ran inside, only to find my tough CEO husband bawling uncontrollably. And fearing the worst, I began screaming. Because I knew that if he's crying, I'm crying. And when he heard me screaming, he looked up from his hands, and I saw a huge smile on his face. So I started dancing. I was dancing like a lunatic in the middle of the hospital. I was just dancing. I didn't know why I'm dancing, but he's smiling, so I'm dancing. When the doctors told Jonathan that he had saved her life, he cried 10 years worth. We had been married 10 years at the time, and he had never, ever, ever shed one tear. I tell him till this day, that day you cried 10 years worth. They watched the DVD in the hospital. And yes, there is a DVD of the entire event. It's a private building, and there's a lot of celebrities who live there, so the entire place is under surveillance. So the surveillance camera overlooking the pool captured the whole thing. And they had to watch it back to figure out if there's any kind of trauma. Did she bang her head? How long was she in the water for? My daughter Gali was clinically dead for 3 minutes and 10 seconds. Could just for 1 minute stop and think? I used to be a lifeguard. I can't hold my breath for more than 45 seconds. She was 2 years old, a tiny little nothing. She weighed maybe 22 pounds. 3 minutes and 10 seconds to be clinically dead. That's unheard of. We had to transfer her to Miami Children's Hospital in Coral Gables because that's a special hospital just catered to children and especially to drowning victims. So my husband flew down some big neurologists. He said, it's my daughter, I want the best. And 8 hours of tests worldwide to Hillim, and every single member of my family taking upon themselves one area of sneeze. And we finally await the neurologist to walk in and tell me the news of my daughter. We knew up until now that she's alive. We knew nothing about her neurological state. So the top neurologist, who my husband flew down from Boston, his name is Dr. Keith Meyer, he walked into our room, and he said to us the following. He was joined by his entourage, and he said, Mr. and Mrs. Aminoff, we're doctors. We practice medicine. The basis for medicine is science. And the top neurologist of practically all of America starts crying. And he says, your daughter Abigail Chana, she's not science. She's not medicine. She's a miracle. They lit up the wall with all of her scans, and he put her brain scans, her CAT scans and MRIs and all that. And he says, 3 minutes and 10 seconds of being clinically dead, not a trace of brain damage. They lit up the wall with her lungs, the x-rays from her lungs. He says, Mrs. Aminoff, these are her lungs. You cannot tell that she was underwater for even 10 seconds. Her lungs are perfectly clear. There's not 1 ounce of water in her lungs. He put her blood work on the wall. He said, this is her blood work. Not 1 trace of blood gas in this little girl's body. He said, we cannot make sense of this. So I'm sitting there with this big, huge blue pashmina on my head. And I'm pointing at it. And I'm like, I think I know what it is. And we actually stopped and asked the doctor right then. I said to him, Dr. Meyer, are you Jewish? And he said, like, you can tell, like, maybe his mom is Jewish. And he said, yeah. So I said, do you believe in God? And he stopped, and he looked at the other doctors, and they all kind of, like, nodded, like, I guess we do now. And he said to me, he said, you know what? I'm going to be honest with you. Up until today, I don't know what I believed, but I promise you I can go home tonight and tell my wife and kids there must be a God in the world because of Kali. Because this just doesn't make sense. And we're practical people. We need statistics. We need proof. This is God. So in my heart, I kept thinking, this whole nightmare may have just been for this one doctor in Coral Gables to become a Choser B'Teshuva because of my daughter. If that were the case, it would have all been worth it. But for sure, it was much more than that. Hashem needed something huge from me. So the doctors gave us a moment to regroup and basically told us, take your miracle daughter and go home. Goodbye. No follow-ups, no nothing. Baruch Hashem, go home. So she fell into the pool on Monday. She was released from the hospital Tuesday night. Wednesday morning, she was back in the pool. I didn't see the pool for 2 weeks. I sat and I cried at home upstairs with my little baby, and I just absorbed, but she was back in the pool Wednesday morning. Now, when the doctors gave us a moment to regroup, there were a few things I had to tell my husband, with changes that I just made. So I didn't know how to break it to him. So I was like waiting for someone to like make some kind of introduction, like, okay, Charlene, here you go. What do you need to say to your husband? So I said, okay, honey, there's a few things I need to tell you. He's like, no, me first. I'm like, no, trust me, you want me to go first. So he's like, okay, what is it? I said, well, first, all my design, first of all, I'm not wearing bathing suits anymore. Second of all, you know all your business partners? Well, I'm not going to be able to shake their hands anymore because now I'm Shomer Negia. Third, all my designer gowns and clothes that have slits, all the slits are being closed. 4, the movie theater you just finished building in my basement is not going to be allowed to be plugged into cable. 5, I'm covering my hair. And he was thinking for a second, he's like, oh my gosh, okay. Wait. How do I tell the guys? Okay. Inter-office memo, okay. Movie theater? Super Bowl Sunday? Okay, fine, it's okay. And then he thought to himself and he said, you know what, honey, I have to tell you something. When you reached over for that blue pashmina shawl, I recognized right away what you were about to do. And to be honest, I was so happy you were about to do it because I knew there's no way I'm getting her back on my own. So you actually encouraged me and inspired me to give a little korban of my own. So he said, when I saw you reaching for the shawl, and it's like you had reached that point where you were like, okay, Hashem, I give in, and you started wrapping your hair, I said to Hashem, for 20 years I gave you Hatzalah. I never once asked for anything back. I'm cashing it all in. I'm cashing in every last schar. And if you, Hashem, give me my daughter back, I promise you 20 more years in Hatzalah. So he said, when I finish my promise of 20 more years in Hatzalah, you finish your Shechianu, and I go like this, and I have her pulse. So honey, I'm going to be in Hatzalah. I'm 58 years old. So I'm like, don't worry, even until you're 90, I don't care. So, not to break up the intensity, but just to give you a funny story that happened in the middle of all this chaos. My husband had to stay with her overnight, even though Baruch Hashem, we already knew before I left the hospital at like 2 o'clock in the morning that Baruch Hashem, things were looking good. Still, we had no idea. They had to observe her overnight. They needed to wait to see how she does through the night. So, of course, I left with all my heart and soul attached to her bed. When my husband was there and the top doctors were there, so I said, you know what? I'm going home. I have a 3-week-old. I got a nurse. I got to get my act together. I'll be back here, Mitzvah Hashem, first thing in the morning. But I spoke to my husband the whole drive home. And I spoke to him practically until the morning. I think the only 15 minutes that I actually fell asleep, he woke me up with a scary phone call. And I pick up the phone, I see Jonathan's cell on my phone, and my heart starts racing. I'm like, oh no, Hashem, what? Hashem, please, no more drama, no more drama. And I pick up the phone, and I'm like, what is it, what happened? And he's like, honey, something's wrong, oh my gosh, something's wrong. And I'm like, okay, what is it? I can't handle stress. What is it? Tell me. He's like, so I'm sitting with her, and I'm like, okay, Gali, she wants the color. So I'm like, okay, great, let's color. So they bring her crayons, and I'm like, Gali, take the purple crayon, and she takes the pink one. And I'm like, take the blue one, and she takes the green one. Honey, there's something wrong. I'm like, she's 2 years old. I yelled at him so much. I'm like, you woke me up. She's 2. She doesn't know colors yet, sweetie. So, the next day, after she was back in the pool, the building hosted a little party for her. Party / please don't sue us party. So, at the little party, the man who was holding her body was there. And he's a goy, his name is Richard Mariansky. And he came over to us, wanted to give me a hug, which was kind of awkward, but told us, do you guys know that your daughter's a miracle? And my husband and I were like, yeah, she's a miracle. Baruch Hashem. He's like, no, she's really a miracle. We're like, yes, we know, she's really a miracle. He's like, no, you don't understand. I live in the building 2 months out of the year. And when I live here, I never, ever have time to go swimming. That day, Monday, I happened to go swimming because I had an appointment later on in the day, and it was a gorgeous day out, and I figured, you know what, let me kill some time, let me go swimming. But what happened, now, I'm going to try to give you like an imaginary visual. So, the square is a pool. The deep end is here. Richard was doing laps back here. Gali had fallen into the pool all the way in the bottom by the shallow end. So Richard was doing laps all the way in the back, and when he finished on that side. And he started to climb out the ladder of the deep end, and what happened? He pulled a tendon in his knee that morning, and he wasn't able to climb out of that ladder because of his knee. So he wanted to walk out using the shallow steps so that it's less damage for his knee. But what happened that he didn't go straight from that end to that end? Hashem made him walk diagonally across the pool until he found a little ball rolled up on the floor, and that was my daughter Gali. Could you imagine if Chas v'Shalom that morning Richard woke up and his knee wasn't hurting him? There's no way that he would have come to that shallow end. He would have climbed out of the back, gotten his towel, and be done with his day. And there was nobody else in the pool that day. So that was one niece. I'm going to take you soon behind the scenes and give you a bunch of other nisim that took place. But when we got back to New York, we immediately started to plan a giant Seudat Hoda'ah. It was one of the Nadarim I had also made. Baruch Hashem, we were zocheh to sponsor a meal for 2,000 families. In addition, as much as it was a beautiful thing, it wasn't Hamish enough. I wanted something a little bit more meaningful. So we flew down some tzaddikim from Eretz Yisrael and from local, and we had a private little seudah in my home. And at the seudah, the tzaddikim told us that because we had such an obvious and open, a nes galui, not the type of nisim we see so much in our day anymore, that we have to encourage women to cover their hair, and we have to make it, because Baruch Hashem for us it's not about the parnasa, it has a whole different meaning. So they encouraged us to start a sheitel company in Hoda'at Hashem for my daughter's life. So we opened up a sheitel line named Gali's Couture Wigs, and we now operate out of Great Neck, and Baruch Hashem we're spread all over, and it's basically a means of getting a woman to understand the greatness of this miracle because of what it did for me firsthand. And it's affordable, and it's fun, and everybody who walks in gets greeted by me and my sister, and everyone is treated with total derech eretz. And Baruch Hashem, it has been tremendous. And this has finally given me, it's put the stamp on my nace for me. I feel like I needed this to happen for something. Okay, it changed my life, it changed my body, it changed everything, but I want to pay it forward. So our sheitel company is the avenue through which we're mefarsem nes, and it's something fun. After 11 years of being a brunch at home mom and a shop at home mom, I'm finally doing something with my time. So now, to take you back a little behind the scenes for the other nisim that you guys don't know about. First of all, if the jet ski that had broken down was working properly, there's no way that Jonathan would have been at the pool at 3:30 p.m. He would have been back upstairs trading on the 18th floor of the Green Diamond. And there's no way that he would have been able to perform CPR on my daughter. The second case is clearly Richard Mariansky's tendon. If his knee were fine, I don't know what my ending would have been. I think one of the biggest misses for me is the fact that Jonathan was able to go into Hatzalah mode when it was his own child. You know, like I'm a very neurotic cuckoo mommy. Like if my kid gets a fever, I'm finishing Sefer Tehillim by their bed until the morning. So my reflexes are really bad. Like if I see my kid falling down the stairs, I can't catch them because I'm like, oh my God, they're standing there screaming. But my husband, the fact that he was able to jump into action and perform CPR on her and not turn into emotions, that for me was a humongous nace. So Baruch Hashem. And last but not least, when Gali was born, she was diagnosed with a terrible case of sleep apnea, which basically means she snores like a truck driver. She was told time and time again by her ENT that she has to have her tonsils removed. But being the neurotic mommy, I didn't want to see a 2-year-old go under anesthesia. I kept pushing it off because I kept thinking, well, Mashiach's coming soon. She doesn't need tonsils removed. But if not that, we'll just wait until she's bigger. We'll wait till she's older. So right before we went down to Miami in June, her doctor told me, Mrs. Amanoff, the tonsils need to go. It's time. And I'm like, no, please, we're going away. We're going away for 8 weeks. I can't do it now. He said, you have to do it now. I'm not allowing you to go on anymore. She needs to grow. She needs to eat. I'm like, I davened so much for her. She's going to be fine. I promise. No, she needs to have her tonsils removed. So I finally convinced him. I said, okay, I promise you when we come back from Miami. And he's like, we're booking the date now. I said, fine, it can't be in the 9 days. It has to be after Tu B'Av. It has to be like way after Av. Like, get it in Elul-ish. So he was like, okay, he's Jewish. He knows that's crazy. So he said, fine. After the vacation, we went back to New York, and we had to have our tonsils removed. So the day of her surgery, the ENT comes out of her OR, and he's white as a ghost. And he knows, obviously he knows her story. Everyone in the tri-state area knows her story. And he looks at us and he goes, Mr. and Mrs. Amanoff, you guys don't understand, her tonsils saved her life. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? He's like, if you had listened to me and taken out her tonsils before, there is no possible way that she would have survived her drowning. But for some reason, Hashem made you delay it and delay it and delay it so that those tonsils should remain in her body and should aid in her recovery. Because basically her tonsils were so poor, they were so damaged, that they had turned her into like a mountain hiker, like a mountain climber. So the air up there is so thin, you got to bring oxygen with you. She had trained her body to function on very, very, very low levels of oxygen. If she had her tonsils removed, within 24 hours, she would have reverted back to a normal breathing child, requiring 99 to 100% oxygen. And there is no way she would have survived being underwater for 3 minutes and 10 seconds. So that was the final chapter of my book of Nisim. And Hodu L'Adonai Kitov Ki Le'olam Chasto, we realized that Hashem had been sending us so many wake-up calls along the years, and we were so comfortable and caught up in the world that we shouldn't have been caught up in the Gashmias and in the garbage, that we really didn't heed these wake-up calls. If someone had told me the moment I saw Gali lying dead in Richard's arms that if I wanted her to survive, I would have to give them my right arm, I promise you I would have given both. I would have been like, there's no way one is going to be enough for you. You're going to need both. And I think all the moms in here can relate to that. But Baruch Hashem, I didn't need to give Hashem my arms. I didn't need to give him any organs. All I needed to give him was my hair. And that was enough for him. He was content with my hair. When we changed our life, we really, really began appreciating everything so much more. My Moda Anis now are said with the kavana they're meant to be said with. Up until that day, I was saying it like a robot, mechanically. But now when I wake up and I say Moda'ani, I mean it with all my heart. I lived, in my opinion, in my feelings, I feel like I lived through Gehenna. But at the same time, I know what it feels like when Mashiach comes because I had Techiyat HaMetim. So I can tell you that Galut is totally worth it because Geula is so sweet. But what we realized from all this is that in this day and age, Hashem doesn't want us to stress. He really just wants us to stretch. And rather give Hashem something before He comes looking for it. The way my apartment in Miami looked the night Gali came home from the hospital is exactly the way my house in New York is going to look like when Mashiach comes. So I want to give all of you a bracha on behalf of myself and Gali. You should all be zoche to witness the revealed nisim that I was zoche to witness without having to endure any kind of nisayon beforehand. Thank you.
Okay, for round two, and after this, you're all welcome to join me.